Okay, so today we are still doing geometry. We're still talking about angles, and we're just moving on to some new shapes. We have done lines and we have done triangles, and now we are moving on to quadrilaterals. It's a really hard one to say, but it just means we're moving on to shapes that have four corners. Like the one right here, a rectangle. So you can see in the picture now that this rectangle, all of the angles, I'm going to draw now, this angle here, this angle here, this one here, and this one here, all are 90 degrees. They're all 90 degrees. 90, 90, 90. And this line and this line are the same length, aren't they? You can see that. They're the same length. And this line and this line are also the same length. And that is what makes it a rectangle, is that the top and the bottom are the same length, and then the left-hand side and the right-hand side are the same length. And all four corners are 90 degrees. Whenever you see that little red square, the one that I'm coloring in yellow now, whenever you see that, that means it's a 90-degree angle. Okay? Now, one thing you should notice, with quadrilaterals, okay, with four-sided shapes, when you add all the corners together, so when you add all the angles of all of the four corners, when you add them all, it's 90 plus 90 plus 90 plus 90. You get 360 degrees, okay? So the total angles inside of a quadrilateral, inside of a four-sided shape, will always be 360 degrees. Now, I want to show you another shape that is very similar, but a little bit different. And that is something called a parallelogram, okay? So a parallelogram is a rectangle that has been pushed to the right or to the left. See the way it looks exactly like a rectangle, but it's slanted. So one side is slanted. Now, a parallelogram, the left-hand side and the right-hand side, I'm going to color them in yellow. This side here and this side here, they are the same length. They're the same length. And then you have the top side and you have the bottom side, and they are also the same length. Okay? So it's just like a rectangle. The left-hand side, right-hand side, both the same length. Top and bottom, both the same length. But in a parallelogram, something's a little different, okay? So there is something a little bit different in a parallelogram. The angles are different. There are no 90-degree angles. Do you see that? There's no right angles. There's no 90-degree angles in a parallelogram. However, you can see this green angle and this one here, I'm using the blue pen just to point them out. They are equal. So for example, this might be 110 degrees, and this would also be 110 degrees. So in a parallelogram, opposite angles are equal. Now, if this is 110, this angle here, which I'm just going to change the color, I'll change to this. This angle here must be 70 degrees. And the reason it must be 70 degrees is because if you add this angle and this angle, see where I'm coloring in? If you add those two angles together, you have to get 180 degrees, okay? And over on this side, this must also be 70 degrees, and this is 110. So when you add those two together, you get 180. And also, if you look, this angle, this 70-degree angle, is opposite the other 70-degree angle. And opposite angles are equal. So they are equal. And these angles are equal. All right? So that's the first rule of parallelograms. Now, I want you to have a look. I'm going to get rid of this for a sec. I want you to have a look at this. This is a square, okay? Now, a square, all four angles. Sorry, I forgot to change the settings. Now, all four angles in a square are 90 degrees, okay? 90 degrees, 90 degrees. The only difference is that a square, all of the sides are equal in length. The top and the bottom, the left and the right, they are all the same length, okay? So it's like a rectangle, but the difference is all the sides are the same. So for example, this might be 10 centimeters. This is also 10 centimeters. This is also 10 centimeters. This is also 10 centimeters. Whereas when we were looking at the rectangle, this side might be, this side might be 15 centimeters. This side is 15 centimeters. But this side would be 5 centimeters. And this side would be 5 centimeters. So that's the difference between a rectangle and a square, in case you forgot. Now, if I push the square to the right or to the left, if I make it slanty, you get something called a rhombus, okay? It's a nice name, I think. A rhombus, okay? And a rhombus is just a slanty square, but it has the same rules as a parallelogram. This angle might be 110 degrees. That means that this angle is 110 degrees. So that means that this angle would be 70 and this angle would be 70 degrees. Because if you add the top and bottom angles, you have to get 180, okay? And when we add them all together, we should get 360, okay? So the key rules are all four angles added together equal 360 degrees, okay? And the next one, the next rule is opposite angles are equal, okay? And the third one is that two angles on the same side add up to 180 degrees, okay? That is key, that you remember that. And I just want to show you one more thing. So if I hide this for a second, and I hide this for a second. Now I'm going to draw a quick sketch, okay? It's going to be very rough. So this is what? What's this called? What do you think that is called? Hopefully you said that this is a parallelogram, okay? This is a parallelogram. Now, you can divide your shapes into two. You can draw a line like this, and now you have a triangle here and another triangle here, okay? So we can have triangles. And what are the three angles of a triangle added together? they add up to 180 degrees, the three angles of a triangle. So for example, if we have angle A, angle B, and angle C, if we add up A plus B plus C, you have to get 180 degrees. Okay? So, now that we've done that, I'd like us to try and do a few questions. Oh, there's one other thing. If you have a parallelogram and it looks like this, you can also divide it this way. You can make two triangles this way. Okay? So I'll just hide this and we will go on to these questions. So now, I would like you to pause the video and I would like you to try and do these questions, okay? Okay, if you've had a go, that's brilliant. If you're stuck, follow along with me. So, let's do the first question, and then if you're like, okay, after the first question, you're like, okay, I get it, I can do it. Then what I want you to do is pause the video and try and do the rest, okay? So as you go, you judge, you push yourself, you say, okay, I don't get this at all, I'm just gonna watch it, that's fine. If you get it a little bit, you can maybe watch a little bit of the video and then try it yourself. So it's very important that you test yourself. Okay, question number 1. We know that this angle is 80 degrees, okay? And this angle is called A. And they want to know, what is A? A is what? Well, it's an opposite angle. They are opposite each other. So opposite angles are equal. So A must be 80 degrees. And then over here, we have this one here, 115, and it is opposite B. So B must be 115. Okay? Now, how do we figure out what C is? Remember one of the rules that I told you. If you add the two angles on the same side, you have to get 180 degrees. So we just figured out that B was 115 degrees. Now, if I add B and C together, I should get 180 degrees. So how much do I have to add to B to get 180? I would have to add 65 degrees, wouldn't I? If I add 65 to 115, I get 180. So this must be 65 degrees. Now, this one over here, we are looking for D and we are looking for E. Okay, let's look at this, okay? This line here is a straight line, isn't it? You can see with your eyes that it's a straight line. And you can see that this angle here is 75. Now the angle of a straight line is, you're right, it's 180. So if this side is 75, D must be whatever is left over if we take 75 away from 180. So D must be 105 degrees, okay? 105 degrees, because if we add 105 and we add 75, we get 180. So D must be 105 degrees. Now, what did we just say in the last question, B and C? If you add B and C over here, if you add these two together, you have to get 180. So if I add D and E, I have to get 180. So what would I add to D to make it 180? Well, I'd add 75, wouldn't I? So this angle is equal to this angle. And I'll just color it in. This angle here, which I'm coloring in yellow, is equal to this angle here. Yeah, it's kind of handy. Now, if you want, if you feel a bit more comfortable with these questions, you could pause the video now and try and do the last 3 questions. But no worries if you're not. You can keep working along with me. But pause the video now if you want to. Okay, now we have to figure out over here what A is and what B is. Well, A is opposite 120, isn't it? And opposite angles are equal. So A must be 120 degrees. B, well, we figured out in this sum up here that 2 angles on the same side added together must be 180. So if I add this angle with the 120 degree angle, if I add that to B, it has to equal 180. What do you add to 120 to make it 180? You add 60. And did you notice something here? If A is 120 as well, and this is 60, if you add these 2 together, you get 180. And if B is 60, well, this one up here, this one must also be 60 degrees. Okay, now this one here has been cut up into 2 triangles. However, first one we have to figure out is C, and then we have to figure out D. So C is opposite 80. It's the opposite angle, isn't it? It's across from it. Now there might be a triangle, there's a line cutting through it, but this is still opposite this one. C and 80 are still opposite each other. Despite there being a line across, they're still opposite. Okay? Which means that C must be 80 degrees. Now, one of the rules that we know is if we add the 3 angles of a triangle, we should get 180 degrees. Which means that if we add C and D and 55, we should get 180. Well, what do I have to add? So I've got 80 degrees and I'm adding 55 degrees, and then I have to add D, and it will give me 180 degrees. What's D then? What is D? Well, 80 plus 55 gives us 135. Let me just write that out. Am I right? 135 degrees if you add those 2 together. Yeah, I'm right. And so D must be 45 degrees, correct? So D must be 45 degrees. Because if we add 45 plus 55 plus 80, you get 180. Okay, next question. So we know that this is 75 degrees. And we're trying to figure out what E is. And E is the opposite angle, isn't it? It is the opposite angle. So E is equal to 75 degrees. Now we have to figure out what F is. And we can see that F, this is a triangle, okay? So F is whatever the difference between E and 50 is added together and take away 180. So if I add E and 50, so for example, E is 75, isn't it? We said E was 75 degrees, and we add 50 degrees. Excuse me. We add 50 degrees plus F equals 180. So what is F? Well, 75 plus 50 is 125, correct? So what is the difference between 125 and 180? It is 55. 55. I'm doing these in my head, so I'm a little bit slower. So I can get rid of this. Now, we have to figure out what G is. Now, G is probably a little bit difficult. But if you remember that E is 75 degrees, okay? We figured out that E was 75 degrees. And in all the other sums, we had to find out what this angle, when we find out what this angle and this angle added together. So when you add this angle here and this angle here, when you add them together, you get 180, yeah? That's correct, right? So when you add this angle and this angle, you should get 180. Now we know that 50 plus 75 is 125, right? So that means that G must be the difference between 125 and 180. So G is 55 degrees.